Come on! For those of you who didn't see part 1, there's a link in the description below, but for those of you who did, here's a brief recap. In part 1 I found plenty of ants but only a sprinkle of direct sunlight, which made photographing the oddly blue newts rather tricky. I tried a number of new photo ideas, most of which needed work, and I managed to stumble across what can only be described as frogspawn in a tree, which of course needed further investigation. But as the forecast was actually predicting some direct sunlight for the first time that week, the priority for day 4 was to improve on the shots of newts, so that's exactly where I started. Now, a little bit of a technical explanation. I'm going to be using my tripod for this. Having used Jack's very nice heavy-duty low-level tripod previously, I came away realising that I actually wasn't low enough. I'm going to be using this one because I'm far happier completely submerging it. And although this is a low-level tripod, ow, ow, ow. And although Jack's heavy-duty small tripod is absolutely brilliant for all kinds of low-level filming, this mechanism is actually quite tall. So if you want to get absolutely level with the surface of the water, you kind of need to go for something like this. The sacrifice you're making is the ability to move smoothly. But as I don't need to do that, then there's no problem at all in going for this kind of tripod. So let's get it set up. Oh, cold hands. I think this might be confession time. Oh, that's very cold. Here is an empty frame from my submerged GoPro. The more eagle-eyed among you will notice something strange. If you look to the left, you'll see the frogspawn is bright blue, whereas if you look to the right, it's much more neutral. It's a similar story with the empty frame from my 5D4 as well. And as you may have already guessed, this strange difference in colour depending on where the frogspawn is probably why the newts appeared so blue in part 1. And why you may not have been able to spot this much more modest newt sat in the middle of the frame. I don't exactly know what it is, but rather than exaggerating colour, which we all know cameras can do, it seems almost to be creating colour. My first thought was that it was simply in areas where light has less to pass through, but as it happens with newts and twigs, things which are pretty dense, and I don't think that can be the case. If anyone knows the actual science behind what's going on, I'd love to know in the comments below, and if you can support your argument with data or research, I'll pin the comment. In the meantime though, I think we should move on to something that can be explained. So I've decided to leave the camera in the water and come away from the newts for a little bit. In the meantime though, I've come back to where I left off in day 3, which is this tree holding the potential frog spawn. Although there are a few colonies of tree frog in the UK, which I found really surprising, the most likely explanation is that actually that's a common frog's ovaries that have just exploded. Let me explain. Common frogs, and to be fair a lot of other frog species, are predated on throughout the year by all manner of creatures, but particularly birds, which take them to trees like that in order to eat them, where they themselves are less likely to be predated on. Each time they do this, there's one thing that they always try to leave behind, which is the ovaries. The reason being that when they eat them, they expand in the stomach and cause a lot of stomach pain. Most of the year, those tiny little ovaries disappear within a matter of days and are never noticed by the likes of you or I just wandering through a woodland. However, in early spring, those ovaries are full of frog spawn, and if they are left behind, they'll later burst, leaving behind what we saw on the tree. So what we're looking at here is a springtime phenomenon and the results of a frog predation. Pretty cool, really. I know a lot of you are big nature nerds and probably already knew that, but I found it interesting. When I returned to the pond, the brief period of activity from earlier in the day had completely died down, and the newts were nowhere to be seen, so I headed home. I arrived early in the morning for day 5, feeling confident. It was a sit and wait job that was needed, and with clear skies forecast for the morning, nothing could dampen my spirits. I set up in the usual place and found myself a perfect frame to film any passing newts. It was nice and bright, relatively speaking, and it showed the habitat nicely, making it clear it was underwater, but also adding a bit of extra interest in the form of the wall of frog spawn on the left. All I needed now was to wait for a newt to take centre stage, and with there being so much activity in the past few days, I was certain it wouldn't be long. Okay, I was wrong. It was a very long wait. So long, in fact, that the improved light conditions passed by completely, and the day once again became very flat, dull, and dark. Despite my patience and persistence with trying to film the newts, day 5 was soon just another rather empty day ticked off the list. Day 6 started like so many had in the week. Grey skies, a looming threat of rain, and an almost eerie silence. So I decided to start the day by going for a wander. However, as I slowly explored that quiet patch of woodland, perhaps trying to postpone another day of photographic failure, I found myself feeling overwhelmingly content. After so long spent indoors, even a week of lackluster results was something I felt grateful for, because at least I was out and about again. And bizarrely, as I was having that small epiphany, an unforecast break in the clouds released golden sunlight onto the dormant forest floor, bringing it to life. So I jumped into action. The only thing is, you've still got to chase the light as it moves. As the day drew to an end, I began to experiment with angling the lens directly into the sun, though I still can't decide if I love or hate the end results. Right, so some of you may recognise that from the start of part 1. And the idea was to use it to try and capture some of the larger animals in this woodland. It was actually built by a friend of mine for that very purpose. However, as I started the week and as it progressed, I came across animals like newts and ants that I really wasn't expecting to see, and so they took up a lot more of my time, which is kind of the way with wildlife really. It never goes to plan, be it good or bad. So unfortunately it's not going to be used this video, so I do apologise if you're waiting to see some hide photography. But if you do want to see a full video using that in the spring and summer, then let me know in the comments down below and I'll try and oblige. On to the rest of the day. As this was the final day, I knew it was my last chance to make the most of the specialist lens that my friend Jack had lent me, so I started by getting a couple of shots of the frogspawn. Thanks to my attempts a few days prior, I knew a green background and taking shots from inside the mass didn't really work. So I positioned the lens just outside of the frogspawn, made sure there was no foliage behind it, and managed to capture a couple of relatively interesting looking photos that I think were at least a mild improvement on the shots previously that week. After that, I set my sights on one thing. So I'm just sat by a tree, getting some wildlife photos using my phone. I downloaded the app, so I've connected the app to the camera, and I'm getting a live feed from my camera through to my phone, and I'm just waiting for a newt to pass across and I can take the photo. Come on! Oh, look, is it perfect? No. Is it sharp? Yes. Is it interesting? Yes. Is it a species? Is it a species that I've not photographed before? Yes. Am I ridiculously excited? Yes. I was really having to concentrate and I just saw a tiny bit of movement in the background. And this one newt shot across, and just as I was hoping, it stopped directly in front of the lens for just a few seconds, which is what I was hoping for, which allowed me to use a really slow shutter speed. And it was exactly where I'd focused the lens before, because the previous shot was just slightly out. So there's a tiny little needle poking up just in front of the newt. And I used that because the previous newt had swum between that little pine needle and the bit of frogspawn in the background. So I knew that if I focus between there, there's a likelihood that they'll be using the same path. And that's exactly what happened, and I got it! Obviously I was super chuffed with getting my first newt shot, but I knew there was plenty of ways it could be improved, so with a couple of hours left, I adjusted the setup and kept trying. So I'm currently watching my phone very intently because the screen is very dark. That's basically down to it being a manual aperture lens, which is maybe a bit technical for the stuff I tend to get into on this channel. But basically it's darker than the photo is going to end up coming out. And I managed to create a very, what I think is an interesting natural frame of leaves in the bottom leading up to an empty space and leaves arched over the top with just a dapple of light. Now, I came very close as one came up from underneath the leaf, which wasn't what I was aiming for. Don't just stand, actually do just stand. Oh no, go, go, go. That's fire. And then I think I've got an awesome shot of a newt crossing left to right, and it's just passing through some of the dappled light. And if it's sharp, and if it's as clean as I think it is, then, I'd be so happy, so happy. Come on, baby, turn right. Turn right. No, turn right. Go that way. As always, a special thank you to my patrons for supporting these videos and helping to make them possible. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing or sharing it with others. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time.